years, and I see every day what a good man Tim Kaine is. I think that's why he's got such broad-based support. I think that's why he's leading this election based on the polls in double digits. A lot of that is due to the fact that he's always an independent voice for Virginia. I think back to the fact of when he raised the issue against then President Obama about the whole question of the War Powers Act. His continued bipartisan work, for example, with Joni Ernst on fentanyl, or with Katie Britt on trying to lower the cost of childcare, or more recently standing up to make sure that we protect NATO with Marco Rubio. Time and again, Tim is there for Virginians whenever they're in need. I think about his trip and some of the activities he and I and the governor of others have taken place in terms of making sure that folks in Southwest Virginia are being able to recover from the hurricane. His opponent, I won't call his name, but his opponent has had a very different approach. It's totally embraced the MAGA agenda. It appears that he would support a national abortion ban. And one of the things that I frankly don't understand, but his opponent continues to denigrate and degrade rural parts of Virginia. Frankly, parts of the Virginia that Tim and I have always gone and campaigned in, even when we're not successful in winning the majority of the vote. And to see his opponent put down, whether it be Abington or Stanton, is pretty remarkable. Or his opponent's willingness to basically not call out what an enormous effect would have if Donald Trump were to be elected and 150,000 plus federal employees were suddenly to be put out of work. In these closing last 36 hours, thank goodness, I think we're finally near the end. On the national stage, I think I feel much better about where the Harris campaign is today than a week ago. I think we've seen a series of late-breaking voters moving towards Harris. A lot of that due to her message that rather than having a list of grievances, she will work for the American people. But it's also been, I think, exacerbated by, at the most complimentary, just the bizarre actions of Donald Trump in this last week, whether we see his comments about Liz Cheney, whether his talks about the media in terms of how people would have to shoot through them, his I don't even know how to describe on a family Zoom his actions with the microphone the other day, and then in this late breaking activity, he embracing Robert Kennedy's view that suddenly this issue of one of the top things going to be, which is to take fluoride out of our water. I'm not sure that is a top national issue, but if those are the issues that the Trump series of grievance campaign is going to end up, I think it bodes well for Kamala Harris. On a personal note, let me just say, I spent a lot of Saturday at early polling stations, particularly in both in Henrico and Prince William County. And I've since learned that those had the highest early vote turnouts in history. And what particularly struck me in both jurisdictions were not only the long lines, but in Henrico, it appeared that close to 70% of the early voters were women. And in Prince William County, it was maybe not quite as high as 70-30, it was more 60-40. But it also, the absolute diversity of Prince William really struck me. This was the people lining up to vote were not simply white voters or African American voters, but they really reflected the new face of Virginia. And the number of new voters, whether they be young or whether they be immigrants who've received American citizenship, was pretty striking as well. So we're down to the last, I guess it's like 30 hours before our polls close Tuesday, tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. And I get the last point I want to make before I give it over to Laura for questions is just, I continue to be very concerned as chairman of the Intelligence Committee about what we may see in these closing hours. We've obviously lots of reports about the wave of Russian disinformation, the greater use of deep fakes. I believe we will see a lot more of that later today and tomorrow. I think it may even get worse after the polls close on Tuesday night. The ask I make of Virginians in an attempt to do public service last week was just saying, take a deep breath. If you see something on the internet, just because you see it on the internet doesn't mean it's true. And if you see something that just seems too outrageous, take a moment and check another site because chances are, if it's too outrageous, no matter which candidate you're for, it probably is not true. But I have high confidence in the integrity of our voting system in Virginia, as well as across the nation. We will get through it, but I can imagine these next few days are going to be as tense as anything we've seen in recent modern American history. And with that, Laura, why don't I